I'm James Altucher, and you're watching Behind the Brand with Brian Elliott.
Hey everyone, I'm Brian Elliott. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Brand. Today I'm here with bestselling author James Altucher. James, welcome to the show.
Oh my God, not only am I so excited to be here, but I feel like I'm the last in line. You've had all my friends on the show, and now finally I'm on.
The honor is mine. We're here in New York City, and we're super excited to be here. I usually ask my guests, how'd you get this job?
This job, I don't know what my job is. So my goal every day is to fill my day with as many of my own choices as possible. So I don't want other people to choose for me. I want to say, okay, I'm going to do a podcast because I love to do it. I'm going to do this interview with Brian because I really want to do it. I'm going to work on a book because I really want to do it. And over time, you can start to make decisions that weed out negative choices for yourself and have more and more positive choices for yourself. So along the way, I've started and sold some companies. I've turned down opportunities that were not good to focus on things I loved and build up on those. And they might not be as lucrative, but I build up and build up and build up so they create income. And I've also, in the past year, I've thrown out all my belongings so that it's easier for me to be mobile, to move around, to not worry about things that I can't control, like furniture or maintenance or whatever. And I live in Airbnbs or with friends or whatever. So in general, I make the day, my job is to make the day as filled with my own choices as possible. So that's how I do it. And it's over time. It can't happen overnight.
Wow, there's so much there that I want to unpack. I have lots of questions for you. A lot of people who watch this show, they're entrepreneurs. And like all of us, the struggle is real. And you're someone who's sort of been there and done that in many ways, right? You've had high highs and low lows. I want to talk about some of those things, but maybe let's start with maybe the best piece of advice you've ever gotten and maybe the worst piece.
I think the best piece of advice I've ever gotten is that if you always think outside of yourself, you're going to have opportunities. So if you always give to a world that's much greater than your small, tiny world of worries and stresses and anxieties, then eventually, whether it's tomorrow or a year from now or 5 years from now, you're going to get the rewards of that. And you don't do it for those rewards. You do it because you have higher meaning and higher vision in life and how and what excites you and what you love. But ultimately, doing that and being persistent about it pays off over time. And you could even tell yourself, oh, I'm feeling anxious and worried, but don't worry, I have faith that if I keep doing what sets my heart on fire, then I will get rewarded for that. And even at my lowest lows and my biggest anxieties, and I've had such extreme anxieties, I can't even begin to tell you, but having that faith or trying to find that faith somewhere in the mess inside has brought rewards for me.
Can you talk about who gave you that advice? Is it personal?
I think it's kind of advice I've glommed together over time from many people. And probably the worst advice I've ever gotten is to stick to what's worked before. So going the standard path of college, then job, then rise up, then go for promotions and focus on money, then buy a house and get into debt. All the standard pieces of advice don't really work. Like, the world changes constantly. Like, we live in a world that evolves and humans are made to adapt to a changing world. And so you kind of can't go with what's worked in the past. You have to go with what works now. And another thing related to that is, and this changes every day, but people always tell me you should focus. And I think focus is not such a great idea. If you're focusing on just one thing, you might miss all the exciting things that are happening around you. So really pay attention to what excites you and not just say, oh, I can't go to what excites me because I have to continue focusing on this one thing.
So you said a few things that I want to underscore because I think, it was a little bit subtle, maybe you might have missed it, but super important key points. What I heard you say was, if we have success with one thing that we do, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that the next time we do it, it's going to be successful. And the opposite is true. If we fail once at something, it doesn't mean we're always going to fail at that if we try it a second time.
Well, do you mind if I interrupt you?
Please.
So when you fail, the tendency is to think, uh-oh, I failed. That's the only thing that's ever going to happen. So, which is different than, many people get a stable paycheck every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. And if you work for a big company, you'll always get that check until you're fired, and then you don't get the check anymore. But when you have a much more volatile income stream, as an entrepreneur does, on a down month, you feel like, oh my gosh, if every month is like this, I'm gonna go broke. It's gonna be a disaster. And you can't help but think that what just happened to you is what's always going to happen to you. And so, but by the way, the danger is on both sides. If you succeed, you think, oh, I'm always gonna succeed. And not only at this, I'm gonna succeed at everything. I'm a genius now. I'm gonna be a genius at everything. And that's just as dangerous, or even more dangerous, than thinking you're going to fail all the time. So the key is to just say today, the best predictor of a successful tomorrow is a successful today. And so the key is to just focus on, what can I do to learn and improve and be successful today? That will take care of tomorrow.
Yeah, and I would maybe add something to that, just to say that you just have to keep moving, right? And sometimes it's not moving forward, sometimes it's moving a little bit, maybe 45 degrees this way or 30 degrees that way.
You make a great point that to keep moving. I mean, in baseball, of course, if you bat, if you get onto base 40% of the time, only 40% of the time, in high school, that would be the worst failure. And in baseball, it would make you by far the best baseball player of all time. Yeah. So if you're not failing enough, you're probably not, trying for your full potential. Like Ted Williams tried for his full potential. He really understood the science of hitting in baseball, and so he only got on base 40% of the time, but that made him the best baseball player of all time. Whereas now, you just show up for school and you get a participation trophy, and we get addicted to that. We get addicted to participation as success when that's not movement at all.
The other thing I heard you say is focus, and so I guess what I'm hearing is this overall theme of it just depends. It's a custom-made job, right? So what works for James may or may not work for Brian. It just depends. It depends on timing and circumstances and environment and time, like all these different factors. The story or the case study that kind of comes to mind is the story that Adam Grant tells in his latest book, Originals, which is, this missed opportunity he had with his students who eventually went on to
Warby Parker.
Form Warby Parker, right? And the reason he said he didn't invest a small amount of money was because they seemed very unfocused. They seemed wishy-washy, like they had one foot in grad school or in school and the other foot in the business.
Sure. Let me address that because Adam Grant's been on my podcast talking about this story. He's a good friend of mine. But B, I'll tell you my own story, which was related. My very first business I started 20 years ago, I was making websites for Fortune 500 companies back before anybody realized they had to have a website. So this was part of the sale, was teaching them they needed a website. But the key to entrepreneurship is to not take risks, but mitigate risks. You want to succeed, so you want to eliminate the risks. And so what I did was I kept my full-time job for 18 months after I started my business. So I wouldn't have to raise money, so I wouldn't have to worry about paying myself on an off month, so I could pay employees, and so I could, focus on sales. Now, that meant I worked very hard. I worked every free moment on my job. I was focused on my business, and then after my full-time job, I'd go to my business. We had an office a few blocks away, and I'd focus on that. So again, Adam Grant maybe made a mistake, although I don't want to call it a mistake. It was a learning experience for him. But there's this academic view of entrepreneurship where you go all in and you focus and so on, where the guys at Warby Parker said, no, we need to mitigate our risks. And the best way to mitigate our risks, they decided, was to make sure we're not worried about a paycheck at first, so we could focus on improving the user experience, the sales experience, the glasses, and so on. So they did a very good job.
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for Adam, but I will say my own opinion. That was a huge, huge miss for him, missed opportunity. And that's opportunity cost, right? It probably was a $200 million opportunity cost for Adam. But, like they say, failure is a great teacher. And he did learn a ton. He wrote about it in his book, and now we can all learn from his experience. And yeah, it's interesting.
I'm not going to even say it's a missed opportunity for him. You know why? because he wrote as you say, he wrote a great book, Originals, and now he's writing a great book with Sheryl Sandberg. So for him, he's doing what he loves to do. And what are you going to do with $200 million? Was Adam Grant going to suddenly buy a private jet? Like, there's nothing extra you could do with $200 million. And he's going to be a success in life. He's already successful. He's the youngest tenured professor at Wharton ever. So he's fine. I'm not too worried about his missed opportunity.
Well, that's the thing about successful people, right? They just keep on going. And so maybe that was a setback, but it didn't stop him in his tracks. Well, enough about Adam. Let's go back to you. Yeah, hopefully, Adam, you're watching this. Let's go back to maybe your past, and let's talk about getting stuck. What do you think gets people stuck, whether it's emotionally or physically? You know, people are stuck in bad relationships, or stuck in a job that they hate, or they're stuck in a rut, or whatever, thinking a certain way. You're very optimistic today, but there's been times, and I've read your stuff, where you've not been in such a good place. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So there's a difference between being stuck and being miserable. So bad things happen all the time to everybody. So it doesn't matter if you're the richest person in the world, the healthiest person in the world, a medium person in the world, depending on how you're ranking things. Bad things will happen. You'll have a relative get sick, you'll get sick, you might have a financial crisis, you might have some sort of clinical depression. Who knows? Something bad happens in your neighborhood, there's a terrorist attack, which has happened to me. I lived right next to the World Trade Center. I lived right next door to it, and bad things happen. Again, no matter where you are in life. So the question is, not so much how do you avoid bad things, but how do you bounce back so that you can continue to achieve your potential. So so at one point, that business I mentioned to you where I was creating websites for companies, I sold that for a really great amount, and during the dot-com boom, and I got cashed out. I made every smart decision in the world, made millions of dollars, and then because I thought I was smart there, I thought I was smart everywhere, I made every bad decision you could possibly make. I was like a drunken rock star on steroids. It was like, imagine everything a drunken rock star on steroids would do, I would do it as well. I was almost competing with them. And I went totally broke. I went from millions to essentially zero, lost my home, eventually in a related situation, lost my family, lost my wife, I have my kids. But I think the key is, again, that was a miserable situation, and I let it take over my life for too many years. I had regrets and anxieties and depression for many years after that. I've since had very bad things happen to me where the time of bounce back is much faster. And what I realized, because life is kind of a cycle, you have ups and you have downs, what I realized, what was I doing right on the way up and what was I doing wrong on the way down? And I was failing so many times, it was almost like I was my own scientific study. It was like statistically significant how many times I had failed and succeeded. So I realized the important thing is how you use your energy wisely so that you have the energy to bounce back. And energy comes in many forms. There's physical health, so obviously sleeping well, exercising, moving, eating nutritionally. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a gym guy, and I'm sometimes not even the best at sleeping, but I try as hard as I can to make these things work in my life so I have energy. And then there's emotional health. If you're around people who are putting you down, if you're around people who are not such good people, they're lying to you, or they're misrepresenting things, or they always put you into bad situations, much better to hang out with people who are positive, who you love, who love you, who you want to celebrate their successes, they want to celebrate your successes, and you help each other. This is very important. If you look at every business movement in history, if you look at every artistic movement in history, it's not one person, it's a scene. I think of the 1927 Solway Conference, which maybe not everybody knows about it, but you had like, I don't know, 10 Nobel Prize winners in the future Nobel Prize winners in the audience. It's like Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, like all these brilliant people. They decided to get together and help each other. And so they didn't do it by themselves. They worked as a team. You know, the Homebrew Club in the 1970s had teenagers like Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, Bill Gates, all hanging out with each other, trying to figure out what this new modern thing, the microcomputer, was going to do for society. You know, you had artistic movements where you have people like Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein hanging out and creating, you know, pop art, you know, out of nothing. And so every great movement in history is done with a community, is done with a scene. And you have to find your scene, the people who are going to emotionally help you and support you, and vice versa. And that includes down to your romantic relationships and everything. So that's emotional energy and health. Then there's creativity. So creativity is a muscle, and you have to exercise it or it goes away. And the way you exercise, most people don't exercise it. And this is neither bad nor good. We're not taught that we have to exercise it. But you have to write down or do something creative every day. And so at the very least, I try to write down 10 ideas a day. I get a little pad, go to a cafe, order a coffee, and I'll write down maybe 10 business ideas or 10 ideas for books, 10 ideas for some company I know how they can improve, and then I'll send them the ideas. Now, by the way, I'm not going to write down good ideas because I'm not coming up with 3,000 good ideas a year. I'm coming up with maybe one good idea a year out of the 3,000. But the idea of this exercise is to build that creativity muscle so that when it's time to execute, which is the important thing, you have the energy and the creativity to execute. Execution ideas are a subset of ideas. People say ideas are a dime a dozen, execution is everything. I agree, but execution is a subset of ideas. So you have to have your creativity muscle strong. You have to be an idea machine to have the energy and the smart ideas to execute when the time comes. And then finally, there's I almost want to call it spiritual energy, but that's like a weird word. You know, you just have to have an ability to focus on right now. What can I do right now and avoid anxiety and avoid regret? And how can I help people right now? And that will give me energy to get out of bed and start my day.
So let's continue with that thought. So do you have a morning routine, something you do every day? Are you a creature of habit, or is every day a little bit different?
A little bit of both. I think if you do the same thing every day, it's like sort of driving. Let's say I drive to the same location every day. After a while, you kind of forget everything along the way. You ever have that experience where you drive somewhere and you get there and you realize, oh my God, I can't even remember the last 20 minutes. Did I kill anyone? Did I hit like a deer or anything? I can't even remember what happened. So I'm not a believer in do the same thing every morning. I kind of think try to have a little bit of adventure in your life, even mini adventures, and mix it up a little. So I said I go to a cafe and take out a pad and write ideas. Well, maybe I'll go to a different place, or maybe I'll take a walk first, or maybe I'll read a different book, or I'll watch a video before I start coming with ideas, just to kind of get my creative juices flowing. Or maybe I'll stop someone in the street and randomly talk to them. Who knows? Try to do things that kind of get you out of your comfort zone a little bit, because that gets creativity going as well. Your brain follows your body and not the other way around. So you do things and then your brain gets excited and gets creative and starts to think in different ways.
Can we talk about your podcast a little bit?
Yeah.
Kind of tell us what your podcast is about, and also you've been interviewed quite a bit. What is one of the most surprising things that you've learned lately? I remember asking Seth Godin a while back, when was the last time you did something for the first time? And Seth is always trying to reinvent himself, try new things. I kind of want to ask you the same thing. When was the last time you did something for the first time, and what did you learn?
I think I'm always doing things for the first time. I always get asked to do things, like many people. And hey, can you meet me for lunch or dinner? Or hey, you want to try this thing or that thing? And so my rule is I'll say no to almost everything, because I'm very focused on improving my writing and improving my podcasting. Things that are not maximizing the idea of making $1 billion, but they're things that I love to do. But I'll say yes to things that I think will be interesting experiences, or I'll say yes to play. So, a few weeks ago, we were just brainstorming and we said, okay, let's take archery lessons. So we looked it up. We had no idea where you do that. Where can you shoot a bow and arrow in the middle of New York City? And we found there is an archery range, and I went out there and took archery lessons. This was just a week or so ago. Or, same thing we did with rifle shooting lessons. I actually said yes, but then had to say no today to flying around in a fighter jet. So that would have been scared the heck out of me. But if I did it, and now it's rescheduled for next week, but that's something new, brand new that I will do. So all the time, or cold calling a hero of mine and saying, hey, can you come on my podcast? So that's something I'll do, and it's scary. It's scary as anything.
So who's on your wish list for that podcast?
I have so many people on my wish list. It's hard to narrow it down to one. But I'll give you an example of someone who was on my wish list who is going to be off my wish list as of 3 days from now. So I like to play the game chess, and I have followed the career of Garry Kasparov, the former world chess champion, since 1984. I've been following his career, and I've been asking him to come on my podcast for 2 years. Finally, he said yes. He has a new book coming out, and he's coming on in a few days. I'm going to bring a chessboard. Maybe he will play me. We'll see. But that was scary to keep asking him, and I'm happy to, the whole idea of doing a podcast is not because I want it to be entertaining for others. That's how you keep a podcast going. But really, it's 100% selfish. Never in history would Garry Kasparov have agreed to sit down and chat with me and maybe play a game of chess. And because I have a podcast, why don't you come on my show? He said yes. So it's totally selfish for me. I get to call up all my heroes and say, come on my show. People will listen, and you have a book coming out. We'll talk about it. And then I just get to chat with them for an hour. I say whatever I want, and it just is a by matter of fact thing. It's being recorded, and several 100,000 people will listen.
So let's play on that chess metaphor. What parallels to business are there that we can learn from the game of chess?
It's so funny. There are so many parallels to business with chess, but it's not what you would think. My dad taught me to play chess, and he was a very good chess player himself. Played in tournaments when he was younger, and so on. And so I asked him, I was a naive young 10-year-old, and I asked him, does this mean you could be a general in an army because you know chess? And he said, absolutely not. And so that the parallel is not thinking strategically or thinking in military ways and things like that. But here's where the parallels are. When you learn to master one thing, you kind of start to build this, you learn the language of mastery. So what's the language of mastery? Okay, with chess, so I'm a ranked chess master, I had to learn the history of the game. Not for fun, but because I needed to learn how did certain positions and commonly played openings, how did they manifest? How did people play in the 1800s? What's different now? How has chess education improved and chess learning improved? I had to learn, you have to learn a variety of different things. How to play as white, how to play as black, how do you play the end of the game, how do you play the middle of the game, how do you study the opening of the game? So you have to learn from a variety of things. You learn how to model superior people at the thing you want to master. So I would study all the games of, let's say, Garry Kasparov because I wanted to play like him. And so it's, what would Garry Kasparov do here? And you can answer that because you study maybe 1,000 of his games. So you get a feeling, you get an intuition. What sorts of moves would he look at? So, and then you learn how to fail. Because if you play and you're rising up, you're going to probably, if you're moving up in the tournaments, you're going to win maybe 60% of your games and lose 40% until you hit that level where it's 50-50. So you're going to lose lots of games. And at first when I lost, I would literally, I was a kid, I would throw the pieces on the floor. I was so disgusted with myself, and I'd run out of the tournament and I'd quit and I'd cry and I'd skip school the next day. That's how bad a loss affected me. And I wouldn't improve that way. You have to then take the loss and study it. What did I do wrong? What could I do better next time? Am I bad at this type of position? And then I would have a coach, and he would set up position after position for me of that type of position, and I'd learn how to play that type of position. So again, these are just a few of the things, but they all apply to business. If, let's say, I want to be successful at an entertainment business, or a podcast. Well, what's the history of the entertainment industry? What great interviewers do I study? Who do I want to model myself after? What do I do after a bad show? How can I examine it? Who can I show it to ask how I could have improved? And I've had many bad podcasts and have had to show experts and ask them, how could I have improved? And the same thing with my writing, the same thing with business. You learn the language of mastery, and the same principles apply in each case.
So good, James. So good. Awesome stuff. I guess in conclusion here, let's wrap things up. Some final parting words. Here we are, 2017. Let's reflect back on maybe 18-year-old James. If he were living in 2017, what kind of advice would you give him today? Young college students as well, who are thinking about, doing their own thing, whether that's going the traditional route or going the non-traditional route. What advice would you give them?
So you sort of asked a couple of questions. I'll answer them in reverse. There is no traditional route. So the other day I saw a help wanted ad, and the help wanted ad was for a self-driving car engineer. Another help wanted ad, because then it got me intrigued, was for a VR, virtual reality world designer. Okay, now 20 years ago or 5 years ago, this would only have been in science fiction novels. Who would have thought a self-driving car engineer would have been an actual real-world job? And we're living now in a science fiction universe from when I was a kid. And from when you were a kid, and from many listeners were kids. So there is no traditional route, because what's going to be traditional 20 years from now is science fiction right now. And so that's always going to be the case. That's been the case was 20 years ago, 20 years before that, and so on. But it's the rate of change is happening much more quickly, because the exchange of ideas is happening so much faster because of the internet. So, which didn't exist 20 years ago, or when 20-year-old James was around, I should say, or the web didn't exist. But I think that's really the most important advice, is that don't ask the question, what's my passion? Because think about when you were 9 years old. No 9-year-old says, what's my passion? They just build, they get in a sandbox, and they figure the most amazing creative things they can build, and they build it. And so just all the time look around and think, what's the most amazing, crazy thing that excites you? And do it. And you don't have to do it forever. Do it for 30 days to see if that's what you like. Do it for 90 days. Do it for a year. I'm 49 years old. In a couple of days, I'm going to do stand-up comedy for only the second time in my life. There's no point in life where you have to say, okay, well, I'm too old for that now. You're always going to change. You're always going to challenge yourself. You're always going to do new things. You're always going to do things that excite you. The danger is when you stop doing that, then you have to start to ask, what's wrong in my life? What's going wrong? And you have to address that question, because something is going wrong. And you have to get back into that point where you're constantly challenging yourself, constantly doing new things, and always stay focused on taking care of yourself, making money, serving others, getting customers. There's a mix between always doing the new and doing the things that are also good for people around you and customers and entrepreneurship and so on.
So good. So inspiring from James Altucher.